The left's balancing act between competence and woke virtue has turned America's political circus into a clown-run Ponzi scheme, and you're stuck paying for it. While you've been busy surviving Biden's egg prices and dodging your least favorite co-workers' demands to be called they-them, the geniuses in charge decided your safety in the skies is the perfect lab experiment for their diversity quotas. Let's call it DEI air. Mile-high morality meets mid-air collisions, leading to the only thing more understaffed than Reagan Airport's control tower, the Democrat Party's grip on reality. The same folks who swore hiring based on skin color wouldn't ground planes are suddenly shocked when a DEI-piloted disaster leaves them scrambling to blame. Checks notes, checks and balances. Enter President Trump, slicing through the gaslighting like a Tesla on FSD through fog, while Pete Buttigieg is clutching his equity handbook like a parachute made of participation trophies. And let's not forget Kash Patel, the actual minority nominee Democrats tried to cancel because he's not the right kind of diverse. Nothing says inclusion like grilling a qualified brown guy for, checks notes again, respecting the Constitution. Stay tuned. This isn't just a crash investigation. It's an autopsy of how progress became a euphemism for freefall. Starting with Trump's press conference on the aviation disaster, he addressed the tragic mid-air collision over Washington, D.C., which claimed the lives of 64 people, including 3 U.S. service members. He expressed condolences, vowed a swift investigation, and then, brace yourselves, pointed out the painfully obvious. Maybe we shouldn't be hiring air traffic controllers based on identity politics. Shocking concept, right? Apparently, under Biden, the FAA decided that ensuring planes don't collide mid-air was less important than making sure the control tower looked like a corporate diversity ad. According to FAA hiring records, the agency under Biden scrapped its aptitude test after discovering too many white men were passing. Instead, they replaced it with a biographical questionnaire that rewarded applicants for their lived experiences. Meanwhile, in March 22, the FAA proudly announced a recruitment push specifically for candidates with severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric disorders, and missing extremities, because apparently you don't need all of your fingers to land a 747 safely. Predictably, the press ignored all of this and instead hyperventilated over Trump connecting diversity hiring to aviation safety. Their rebuttal: there's no proof yet. Ah, yes, because questioning whether hiring air traffic controllers based on affirmative action over actual ability might lead to planes slamming into each other is totally unreasonable. Meanwhile, actual aviation safety data tells a different story. According to an August 2023 investigation by the New York Times, near-miss incidents due to controller errors have skyrocketed. The FAA itself admitted in a 2023 safety review that air traffic controllers were overworked and undertrained, which sounds a lot like bureaucratic code for "we hired a bunch of people who had no business being here." But instead of fixing that, the FAA doubled down on racial hiring quotas, as outlined in its Diversity and Inclusion Strategic Plan for 22-25, because when in doubt, always double down on the thing that's making everything worse. At the heart of this disaster is a simple, sadly inconvenient truth. Air safety should be based on ability, not checkboxes. But the media refuses to ask why Biden reversed Trump's merit-based hiring policies, because the answer is as embarrassing as Pete Buttigieg's entire career. Under Trump, the FAA restored strict testing for air traffic controllers because, the people telling planes where to go should probably be good at their jobs. But Biden, he turned the FAA into a DEI daycare, ensuring the control tower is a safe space. Just not for airplanes. According to NTSB data, human error is responsible for over 75% of all aviation accidents. But sure, let's keep pretending that hiring based on skin color and lived experiences didn't play a role here. The American people don't need a years-long government probe to figure this one out. The reality is, when you allow woke politics to override competence, that's when people die. And I'll tell you this, if you're still in doubt that Democrats smuggled this policy in order to fulfill their woke agenda, you don't have to look any further than this statement from Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett from just about a year ago.
I think that I've been somewhat effective. We also were able to get monumental legislation into the FAA Reauthorization Act that really flew under the radar, thank God. But this was funding to make sure that hopefully we can increase the number of African Americans and Hispanics that are entering aviation, which can be very expensive, but can obviously be very lucrative. And so we set up a situation where basically there will be full rides for those attending land-grant HBCUs as well as HSIs to go into aviation. In this crazy anti-DEI environment, we were able to get that done because we were working with everybody that mattered. So I do want people to know that we are working. This is just one of those aberrations.
Representative Jasmine Crockett's May 2024 comments about sneaking FAA funding for more Black and Hispanic pilots under the radar have aged like a carton of milk left on a Phoenix sidewalk, except this time the smell is getting harder to ignore. Back then, she was bragging about quietly funneling taxpayer dollars into race-based aviation hiring while avoiding public scrutiny. Now, the FAA's hiring standards are under full-blown congressional investigation. And we just watched an aviation disaster unfold over Washington, D.C. The kind of tragedy that turns equity from a feel-good slogan into a physics lesson about what happens when you let social experiments run air traffic control. And her statement looks even worse now. The FAA was already lowering the bar like it was a limbo night at a dive bar, with reports of rising controller errors, chronic understaffing, and standards circling the drain. According to a 2022 Government Accountability Office report, the FAA was operating with a 30% staffing shortage in critical air traffic control facilities, but instead of finding the best people to keep planes from colliding, they were laser focused on hitting racial and gender quotas. A 2016 Department of Transportation Inspector General report warned that the FAA's hiring practices were pushing out top talent, with only 2% of applicants getting accepted, not due to skill gaps, but because the agency preferred the right demographics over actual aviation knowledge. Then there's a 2018 lawsuit that exposed how thousands of qualified candidates, including military veterans and experienced aviation professionals, were shoved aside because they didn't check the correct DEI boxes. Rather than staffing air traffic control with people who actually know how to land a plane, the FAA decided to turn it into a college admissions office for non-traditional candidates. Now, I think it should be said that this isn't an anti-DEI movement, it's a pro-reality movement. The kind where people will finally realize that checking diversity boxes doesn't stop mid-air collisions. Aviation safety has been going downhill for years. A 2019 MIT study found that serious runway incursions were on the rise, while a 2021 FAA workforce report admitted that half of all air traffic control facilities were dangerously understaffed, forcing exhausted controllers to make split-second life-or-death decisions. Meanwhile, a 2020 Airline Pilots Association report confirmed what anyone with a brain already knew. Pilot error was still the #1 cause of aviation accidents, yet instead of tightening training standards, the FAA doubled down on inclusive hiring initiatives. Sure, Crockett was thrilled her race-based aviation pipeline wasn't noticed in 2024. Well, it's noticed now. And with the FAA under fire, the real question is how many more under-the-radar DEI policies are putting lives at risk? If the goal was to turn air safety into a woke experiment, mission accomplished. But as recent events have shown, when you replace competence with quotas, gravity doesn't care. And that leads us directly into the DNC Leadership Forum, where it became more apparent than ever that Democrats are incapable of learning a single lesson from being basically headshotted in the last election. This is what they were talking about during the forum, believe it or not.
Racism has not gone away since 20 people of African descent came upon these shores at Jamestown, Virginia in 1619, and it's going to require us to think and behave in a new way. It is systemic, it is structural. When it comes to addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging, that is for all people of the United States. That must come across the voting line as well. This is everyone's America. Our story has a new form of glory that must come to our shores as well.
Yes, the DNC's greatest hits album, Systemic Racism, The Never-Ending Grift. Dr. Quintessa Hathaway is running for DNC chair, and her biggest message, America is still 1619. Diversity quotas are salvation, and the only way forward is more DEI. Because apparently in a country where minorities run the government, corporations, and media, we're still living in colonial Virginia. At this rate, they're one speech away from demanding reparations for the trauma of seeing white people exist. She says racism has not gone away since 1619, which is odd considering that black Americans have held the presidency, vice presidency, multiple Supreme Court seats, and lead some of the biggest corporations and institutions in the world. According to the Pew Research Center, black voter turnout has surpassed white voter turnout in several elections, and affirmative action ran for over 50 years, essentially making systemic racism work in reverse. A 2022 study from Harvard's Opportunity Insights found that corporate America now disproportionately favors black applicants in hiring, with white candidates 50% less likely to be hired when competing with a black applicant of similar qualifications. Meanwhile, federal contracts under Biden's executive orders straight up give racial preferences, meaning if you're a white guy trying to start a business, congratulations, you're automatically in last place. But sure, tell us again how Jim Crow is still alive and well. This ritualistic self-flagellation about belonging and access isn't about equality. It's about keeping the racial grievance industry alive and profitable. Notice how they never actually define what success looks like, because it's not about achieving equality, it's about keeping race hustlers employed for life. According to a 2023 McKinsey and Company report, corporate DEI spending has surpassed $8 billion annually, despite a 2022 Harvard Business Review study, proving that forced DEI initiatives don't reduce discrimination. They actually increase racial division. Meanwhile, normal people are just trying to afford egg, with the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting food prices up over 25% since 2021. But sure, let's keep pretending that the real crisis is a black CEO not feeling included in his $20 million salary. Think it could get any better? Well, it does. Just look at this clip from this forum and see for yourself.
So I'm going to, I have a show of hands. How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat? Okay. So that's good. You all pass.
Oh, look, another DNC therapy session disguised as a leadership forum. Every single candidate for DNC chair just blamed their 2024 loss on racism and misogyny, because of course it had nothing to do with record high inflation, skyrocketing crime, open borders, and an administration that made airline safety feel like a game of Russian roulette. Nope. America is just too sexist and racist to appreciate the kind, gentle genius of Kamala Harris. Maybe next time they should try blaming climate change, Mercury in retrograde, or the ghost of Richard Nixon. At least those would be more creative. Let's break down this nonsense. First, the rhetorical strategy here is straight out of the Democrat playbook. Take an embarrassing, humiliating loss, refuse to accept even a shred of responsibility, and instead blame bigotry, patriarchy, or some other invisible force that conveniently absolves them of any accountability. It's the Hillary 2016 post-mortem, reheated and slathered in stale identity politics. The fact that every single one of them raised their hands in unison like they were pledging allegiance to the Church of Woke is the best part. No independent thought, no self-reflection, just the same tired victim narrative duct taped to the corpse of their failed campaign and paraded around like it's still relevant. Now let's talk about the actual reality of Kamala Harris's defeat. Was she unpopular because of her race and gender, or was it because she's one of the most spectacularly incompetent politicians in modern history? Let's take a quick trip down reality lane, shall we? Polling data from 538 showed Harris as the least popular vice president in U.S. history, and that includes Dick Cheney, a guy who literally shot someone in the face and lied about WMDs to invade Iraq. A 2023 Gallup poll found that even among Democrats, Harris had the lowest favorability ratings of any VP in the last 50 years, which is actually impressive when you consider that Dan Quayle once tried to spell potato on live TV, and it still wasn't this light. Major media outlets, including New York Times and the Washington Post, ran brutal reports on the toxic work environment in Harris's office, where staffers ran for the exits faster than Biden at a press conference. And let's not forget her greatest hits. This is the woman who was appointed border czar and then laughed like a malfunctioning chatbot when asked about border security. Then did absolutely nothing as illegal crossings hit record highs. She spewed word salad like it was a talent show. Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to Russia. Ah yes, groundbreaking foreign policy analysis, I see. She was so unpopular in the primaries that she dropped out before her own state, California, even had a chance to vote for her. Imagine getting rejected by California as a Democrat. That's like being a vegan and getting banned from Whole Foods. But sure, it wasn't incompetence, it was sexism. This entire narrative falls apart under even the slightest scrutiny. If America is too racist and sexist to elect a woman of color, then why did Biden, an old white guy, choose her as his running mate in the first place? Why did Barack Obama, a black man, win 2 elections by landslides? Why did Hillary Clinton win 2016 by the popular vote? If misogyny is such an insurmountable barrier, if racism and sexism control every election outcome, why do Democrats keep putting their most unlikable, embarrassing candidates forward? Maybe, just maybe, it's because they pick diversity hires instead of people who can actually do the job. The truth is, Democrats lost in 2024 because they governed like activists instead of adults. But instead of looking inward and asking, hey, maybe people didn't want to re-elect the party that made their lives worse, they resort to the laziest, most predictable excuse, blaming the voters. You at home, it's all your fault. Remember that. They're literally saying, America, you're too bigoted to vote for us. Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how that one plays out. So let's keep it real. Kamala Harris didn't lose because of racism or misogyny. She lost because she's Kamala Harris. And if the DNC's new leadership thinks whining about bigotry is going to somehow revive their party, they're in for another long, painful losing streak, and thank God for that. All that being said, nothing exposed the Democrats' DEI hypocrisy more than the confirmation hearing for FBI Director nominee Kash Patel, a man of Indian descent who, if he were a Democrat, would be hailed as a trailblazer. But since he isn't, this is how they really treated diversity.
Hear your answer, yes or no. Did you make money?
I don't have
This
those
is my
financial
third and last time I'm
disclosures
going to ask you
in front
that
of me.
question.
You have that information.
So you refuse to answer the question.
I answered 1,300
Here
pages.
you are, no answer, and yet you spread dangerous misinformation.
Mazie Hirono, the intellectual powerhouse of the Senate, now moonlighting as a condescending valley girl. Watching this exchange is like watching a Mean Girls reboot, but with lower IQ requirements. Let's break it down real quick. Kash Patel sits there, calmly answering questions, while Hirono goes full airhead prosecutor mode, reducing a Senate confirmation hearing to a TikTok argument. Did you make money? She whines, as if she's interrogating a guy who borrowed her lip gloss and never gave it back. Patel, unbothered, points out that she already has the financial disclosures in front of her, but that's not good enough for Hirono. Instead of reading the documents sitting right there, she pulls out the classic Democrat playbook, repeat the same question in a smug tone, pretend the witness is stonewalling, and hope the media runs with it. And you know they will, because the media loves to back the Democrats. And of course, she finishes with a golden ticket to any Democrat interrogation. Accuse the opponent of spreading dangerous misinformation without citing a single example. Because when all else fails, just label your opponent a threat to democracy and hope nobody notices you're the dumbest person in the room. Hawaii, seriously, you can do better. There is no way this woman is the best you have to offer for the U.S. Senate. The fact that this is who Democrats sent to grill a nominee for FBI director should tell you everything you need to know about why their party is in free fall.
So do you think that America is safer because these 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities. I also believe America is not safer because President Biden's commutation of a man who murdered 2 FBI agents, Agent Kohler's and Williams' family, deserve better than to have the man that point blank range fired a shotgun into their heads and murdered them released from prison. So it goes both ways.
Leonard Pelletier was in prison for 45 years. He's 80 years old, and he was sentenced to home confinement So he's not free, as you might have just suggested.
He killed 2 FBI agents.
That's
That's
true, he
unacceptable.
did, and he went to prison for it and should have. My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we don't have 50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question.
I'm
going to say,
here.
I don't think we're safer.
I think we just witnessed a murder, folks. Durbin thought he had a gotcha moment, trying to paint Trump's pardons as a national security threat. Instead, Patel flipped the script and threw Biden's own actions right back in his face. Biden didn't just commute some random guy's sentence. He let a convicted cop killer walk free. And Durbin, who was trying to grandstand about protecting law enforcement, suddenly had to defend Biden's decision to release a man who literally executed 2 FBI agents at point-blank range. And what was Durbin's brilliant defense? Well, he's 80 years old now, and it was just home confinement. Oh, so that makes it okay. If you murder 2 federal agents but live long enough, you get a retirement plan instead of a life sentence. That's the standard now? Glad to see where Democrats are at. You could hear the desperation leaking out of Durbin's voice as Patel stayed laser focused on the actual crime crisis in America. 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years, homicide rates skyrocketing, and Democrats releasing violent criminals while pretending they care about safety. And of course, when all else fails, Durbin pulls the standard Democrat move. Cut off the debate, declare that the witness just won't answer the question, and retreat before things get any worse. Spoiler alert, they already did. But why stop there? Because there's so much more to what Joe Biden did. He issued a staggering 8,064 pardons during his presidency, the most of any president in history by a long shot, by 2-3 times. In his final days in office, Biden commuted nearly 2,500 sentences, more than any other president in their entire presidency, marking the highest number of individual clemency actions ever. While addressing sentencing disparities is one thing, this level of mass clemency raises serious concerns about public safety. It's one thing to correct actual injustices, it's another to open the floodgates without adequate safeguards. So while Durbin fixates on Trump's 1,600 pardons, perhaps he should also scrutinize the unprecedented clemency spree of his own party's leader, who went full Oprah on the pardons. You get a pardon, and you get a pardon. You killed a kid, you get a pardon.
I want you to turn around. There are Capitol Police officers behind you. They're guarding us. Take a look at them right now. Turn around.
I'm looking at you. You're talking to me.
No, look at them. I want you to look at them if you can, if you have the courage to look them in the eye, Mr. Patel, and tell them you're proud of what you did. Tell them you're proud that you raised money off of people that assaulted their colleagues, that pepper sprayed them, that beat them with poles. Tell them you're proud of what you did, Mr. Patel. They're right there. They're guarding you today. Tell them how proud you are.
That's an abject lie, and you know it. I've never, ever accepted violence against law enforcement. I've worked with these men and women my entire life,
in song,
and I did
Mr.
not
Patel.
make a single dime out of it.
In song. Well, let me.
How about you ask them if I have their backs, and let's see about that answer.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Patel.
This exchange is classic Schiff. Cheap, performative, and utterly detached from reality. He's not asking real questions. He's staging a scene for the cameras, hoping to get a viral clip where Kash Patel looks guilty, except, like most of Schiff's stunts, it backfires spectacularly. First, the look at them demand is so over the top. It sounds like something out of a bad courtroom drama. Patel, completely unfazed, doesn't take the bait and simply refuses to play Schiff's little game. That's when Schiff, who's used to people just rolling over for his nonsense, gets visibly flustered. He actually tries shaming Patel into turning around, as if that's some kind of legal strategy. And then comes the best part. Patel flips it right back on Schiff. Instead of playing along with Schiff's bad faith interrogation, Patel calls out the entire setup. Schiff wanted a forced confession, a TV moment where Patel would either break down or grovel. Instead, Patel stands firm, defends his record, and turns to question and turns the question around. Why don't you ask them if I have their backs? Seems like Schiff went fishing for a gotcha moment, and instead, he ended up flailing like a bad actor caught mid-monologue. At the end of the day, this isn't just about one politician's bad faith theatrics, one administration's failures, or one party's hypocrisy. It's about a system that thrives on deception, distraction, and manufactured outrage. They demand obedience while rewriting reality, banking on the idea that you'll just accept the script they hand you. But ask yourself, why do they always frame accountability as an attack? Why do they demand you ignore what's right in front of you while shaming you for questioning it? The people who preach about justice twist it into a weapon. The ones who cry about threats to democracy are the first ones to silence dissent. And the same politicians who claim to stand for truth spend every waking moment distorting it for their own gain. So the real question is, how long until enough people stop playing along? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.